Welcome to Daddy Square, episode 6. Good morning, Alex.
Oh, are we doing morning? Good morning.
Actually, we recorded at night.
Yes.
Our kids went to sleep. We had no babysitter this weekend. Anyway, Alex had a very hard day today, parenting-wise.
I won't lie.
Yes.
I did. Oh, you want me to talk about it?
Do you want to?
Sure. I picked the kids up after work today. Sorry. I'm trying not to either fall asleep or start crying. So I picked the kids up after school and took them to the park, and, fun was had and the kids were whatever. And then I went to take them home, and
Ben didn't want to go.
Ben didn't want to go.
As always.
Ben threw a full Mussolini, screaming and throwing himself to the ground and refusing to move. It was delightful. At one point, Adam and I started making our way towards the car, and I did that thing that you do where you leave your kid, 25 feet back, and you say, okay, we're going now, and wait for him to come running towards you. And I went around a corner, and he's a stubborn kid, and so he was just sitting there, and I just went around the corner and waited for a few seconds. I hear this woman scream, and of course I immediately dashed out because I was like, oh my God, what has happened? And she's standing there, someone somewhere in her mid-30s. She has two teenagers with her, and she's screaming, who is this child? Who is this child? And I'm like, oh, that's mine. And she turns to me, and she goes from concern to some kind of anger, and she says, I should call the police. How could you leave your child here like this? I can't believe it. Now, I had just had a pretty hard time with Ben, and I was in a pretty brittle state myself, and I said to her, how dare you try to tell me how I'm supposed to parent my child? You want to call the police? Call the police. And she goes on telling me about how I'm endangering my child and all this kind of stuff. And I said, why is this your decision to make, how I'm doing it? And as she walks away with her children, she says, because I'm a mother. At which point I screamed at her, you're also a sexist pig, because there's a tremendous sexism in that statement. I mean, how dare she pull the mother card as if because she's a mother she knows how I should father?
Yes, I don't know. Alex came home and told me this story, and I got really angry. And I think that what's angering me the most is that Alex has already had a tough time with a kid. So I guess her kids were old enough for her to forget what it's like to be with two kids at age 3. Where you have to negotiate and fight with them, and they don't want to do it. They just learn to not wanting what you ask them to do. So it's so hard to manipulate them into doing the routine what we're supposed to do.
And it's sometimes just plain exasperating, and there's not really much you can do about it.
Exactly. But the fact that she didn't recognize that, and she criticized him in the middle of the street and added to the level of stress as if she was saying that he's not a good parent and his decisions are him not being a good parent, I think it's wrong in so many levels, and it's so upsetting. And it also reminds me that it happens a lot on the internet. Like, people are allowing themselves to comment and be mean and be rude because they don't know the person and they don't know the effect that it has on the person. Well, so right. I'm sure she thought she was totally right and she did something good for society. But Alex came home crying and telling me that he's not a good father and he didn't know what to do with himself. And I disagree with the whole shaming and putting down people like that, either if it's in person or online.
Well, look, so let me say this, right? If it's a hot summer day and you find a child alone in a car with the windows rolled up, their parent has done something very bad.
Yeah.
Right? And that's a reason to be very concerned. But when a parent is doing something that you find to be questionable, and I have seen it plenty of times myself, even before I had kids, but certainly since I had kids, when I see that, you know what my first reaction is? That poor bastard. I feel like the parent needs help. And so very often what I'll actually do is, oh, can I help you with that? Can I do something for you? This was not her reaction. Her reaction was, crazy person. In addition to that, pulling the mother card, which, as I said, really triggered me like nobody's business.
Yeah.
So
that was our weekly experience.
Yeah, it's great. Well, wait, I just also want to say, this is the first time it's ever happened to me. In 3 years, I've had subtle suggestions from other parents like, oh, you do that? Oh, that's fine.
Like we did 2 weeks ago when we commented on people's purchases online at Target.
Right. Well, right. Although I think
that was very subtle.
It was warm, but it was direct, but it was warm, But I've had some of this subtle stuff. But this is the first time in 3 years that I've had that level of I don't know, accusation from somebody, a stranger, or from a friend, and it was
devastating.
Really devastating. Because wait, I just want to add one more thing. I don't think there are any secure parents. I don't think that exists, and so it's really easy to push a parent over the line into believing that they're terrible at what they're doing. And you better think long and hard before you do that to somebody, because it's a pretty brutal thing to do.
Yeah. Whatever he said, I just want to make it broader and reminding everybody that it's happening all the time online as well. And the whole shaming thing, I don't know.
So let's talk about dogs.
But first I want to kind of move to a happier story, or to a happier announcement. From this week on, Alex, we're joining Gays with Kids.
Yay, that's right.
So for those who don't know this phenomenal website, gayswithkids.com is actually an amazing online resource that I'm following for 3 years, since our kids were born, and it's kind of a magazine that provides all sorts of stories and pictures and support, basically, for the gay dads community. And we're joining as an official podcast.
Love it.
Yay.
I love that.
So I invite you all to kind of check out this website if you haven't yet, and we're going to put their logo on our page now, and we're joining to a new
the
so
family.
Hi. Yeah.
The Gays with Kids family.
Mm-hmm. So now we're talking about pets.
Let's talk about pets.
Yes. This week we talked to Mark Hiebert, medical director at VCA TLC Animal Hospital in West Hollywood.
That happens to also be our veterinary hospital.
Yes. And we actually wanted to bring our dog for this interview, but at the last minute I figured, why would he want to go to that hospital? Because every time he goes there, he's in trauma. Not because the place is bad, because he's in trauma, because they're taking him away and
sticking things up his hoo-ha and whatever else.
Stuff like that. So we didn't bring him, but it is a fascinating interview. I can tell you that. Not only that Mark is giving us some revelations.
Real revelations, I have to say. I was pretty surprised about some of this stuff.
Yeah, but his personal story is very interesting. Yeah. He was married to a woman. He married to a woman who already had a kid. So he kind of, I don't know if we never talked about whether he adopted that kid or not, but he raised this kid. They had 2 more kids together, and then they got divorced. He remarried to a man here in California. They had 3 kids, and then they got divorced. He has grandchildren.
He doesn't look like he should be able to have grandchildren, I just want to say.
Well, his picture is on Gays with Kids website.
Good-looking veterinarian.
We are going to listen to the interview in 1 minute. I just want to mention a beautiful article that I read this week about... I read it on Fatherly. It's by a person called Alexander Fernandez. The title of it is "My Son Has 2 Dads. This is what happens when he started calling every woman he met mommy." His son is 2. He writes about comments that he got, speaking about sexist pigs, especially for women, like comments that he get. Is it mommy's day off?
Oh, I see. I think that's too harsh. Why are you being so harsh about people who ask that question?
And he writes that over a few weeks, the kids started calling every woman he saw on the street mommy. The librarian, the cashier at the grocery store, his doctor,
RuPaul.
and mommy's at the park. I saw her, by the way, walking.
care.
I show the kids.
I don't care.
Look, kids, here's RuPaul.
I don't care.
I'm going to post it. It's really, really cute. And I thought I kind of identified with that because our kids, it's kind of similar because the kids are calling mommy to a person who they hear is mommy. For example, we have our friend who has a mommy. So, and they hear their friends call.
Right, so they assume
mommy,
that her name is essentially mommy. Yeah.
However, with our kids, because we play a lot of Kylie Minogue in our house, when they used to be a little younger, they used to refer as every blonde woman walking down the street as Kylie. Look, Dad, here's Kylie. And I'm like, no, that's not Kylie Minogue.
No, that's an 85-year-old woman.
I had to say the Minogue, and I had to say it out loud for them to laugh and, get a compliment, because I thought it's kind of embarrassing of my kids pointing at women randomly down the street. You're too sad to actually comment about this, so let's go straight to the interview.
I will say this. This is as much about race as it is about sexuality, as it is about anything else. I am concerned that, if a woman walks up to me and says, when I'm with the kids, and says, oh, is it mommy's day off or something like that, I don't see that as a reason to be upset or to be sensitive.
He wasn't upset in the article as well.
Good, because as far as I'm concerned, it's an opportunity to share something that might open her world up a little bit. You say, actually, mommy is daddy, and yes, it's his day off today. And she gets to go, oh, right, I understand. And I think that that's better than responding with an offended or negative, reaction. Mm-hmm. Should we do this?
Yes.
All right.
Here's Mark Hiebert.
There we go.
Huge show. Good morning.
Good morning, Mark. First of all, I heard a lot of recommendation of trying a pet before you try a baby.
As often something that happens. I often meet clients and their first kids are their pets,
right?
And often when people are single, where they'll get their pet to start with. So in this practice, I've been here for almost 18 years, and I often meet people when they've recently graduated from college. They have their pet, and then I'll see them through their first child, their relationship, and then often the pets they get once they're in a relationship, and then I see their children, and so on and so forth. So it's amazing.
Do you buy the idea that having a pet gives you any kind of hint or clue or feel for what you're getting into?
Well, I made the recommendation with my ex-husband, and so we did that before we had children, and we can tell from what I just said how that turned out. But I think there's absolutely some value in having pets as a component or a lead way. I think they're very similar to having children myself. Pets and young children there are a lot of similarities.
My experience was that when I got my first dog that I had on my own as an adult, it was the first few days that reminds me a little bit of what the first few days with my kids were. Mm-hmm. It was this, oh my God, I've made a mistake. I'm going to have to return the dog. It's too much responsibility. It's going to be awful. The big difference was that within a week, I was kind of had the feel for it. I loved the dog. Everything was good. The kids took a lot longer to experience that transition, but that initial feeling certainly overlapped between the kids and the dog for me, anyway.
Well, it's very true. I often see people who have gotten pets again once they've had children and their previous pets are somewhere else, shall we say, and they're on to their second set of pet children, and they forget how much work it is to to have a new puppy, especially new puppy. Kittens are usually fairly easy, and they're going through the sleepless nights and they're going through the potty training. And I will remind them that every 2 weeks is a dramatic change. And then I usually preface it by saying, unlike with human children where this process takes years.
Right. Yeah, it makes sense.
Or at least months.
How many kids do you have?
I have 5 and I say half. I've been married twice. I sort of have 2 families.
Okay.
My first family, when I met my now ex-wife, she had a son who was 11 years old. So we raised him until he went to college. And then we had 2 daughters. And then I have 3 children with my ex-husband's.
Surrogacy or?
Husband.
It's Los Angeles.
Surrogacy or?
So my 2 oldest children are biologically mine. And then we have a blend of things that happen. So we started out with surrogacy with the intent of adopting at some point in time. And we had a bit of a rocky start with surrogacy. We had an ectopic pregnancy, and it's quite the story. And I started the adoption ball rolling after the ectopic pregnancy, and we were having some difficulties. My ex-husband he couldn't wait to have children. It was very emotional for him, and wanted him to have another focus. I'm sure you know what it's like. The anticipation of trying to get pregnant. I mean, people that go through that. So we end up. Our first child together was adopted. We've adopted all three of our children, I should say. We've had from birth. I've been through every labor except for my stepson. With all my children, I was there. So our second child was adopted as well, and then our original surrogate, who had 1 ovary, and I had maintained a friendship with, insisted we have a child with her and try it again. So we did traditional surrogacy with my ex-husband, and she got pregnant the first time. And so our youngest son
you have
is...
two different families now?
We have all 3 children are not related.
Okay.
2 are adopted. 1 is a surrogacy baby with my ex-husband. And then, of course, I have 2 biological children. I have a stepson. I have 3 biologic grandchildren, and I have 2. My stepson has 2 children as well.
Wow, I have to tell you that's I can't keep all of that in my head, but
soap.
That's great.
It happens really fast once you get that ball rolling.
Cool.
So you're saying that with your ex-husband you had a pet.
We adopted 2 dogs. He wanted to have children right away, and I said, with my ex-wife, she got pregnant when we were engaged, and I said, I'm not doing that again. We're going to have pets first. Right. Being the experienced father that I was at that point in time. And so we got 2 dogs that were through a rescue group. So they, I had 2 clients that came in. I had just started working here, and they had brought a puppy in, and I remember it clearly to this day. And it was a catalog cross, and I fell in love with this dog. And they said, "Oh, well, she has a sister." So my ex-husband went down. I was working; it was a weekend, and he went down and looked at this dog, and he had to put his name on a list, and it was up against us and this soap star actress, who's also happened to be a client of mine. I ended up finding out later, and we adopted her, and then the original people who had the catalog cross I couldn't keep the dog. So we ended up getting both sisters at the end of the day.
Well, let's face it, between the actress and you, you're a vet. You're going to get the dog. I mean, if I'm choosing who gets the dog, I'm going to give the dog to a veterinarian, not to a TV star. I'm just saying.
You know where we live, right?
Well, that's exactly. It's true. It's true.
So how did you introduce the new baby?
Well, the dogs were about 4 years old, I think, at the time. 3 years old, maybe somewhere around there. The oldest just passed away this past January at 16. She had a long, healthy, uneventful life. She was technically my ex-husband's dog. and our other dog had passed away a few years earlier, but they were both very healthy right up until
Thank God.
right up
That's
until
great.
the end, more or less. So we were very fortunate. They were fortunate, but we had them a long time.
So they were four when
introductions, of course, happen gradually. As you know, we had a 2-story house. The kids' room, they're in a crib to start with. I mean, it's not like they have full access to the dogs.
Right.
So the dogs have time to acclimatize, so to speak. They know there's another individual in the home.
Yeah.
So it's a very gradual sort of thing.
So here's my question. When you brought the first dog into contact with the first kid, what did the dog do?
Was it dramatic for a dog? Because, especially for gay parents, dogs get the whole world, at least here in West Hollywood. And then the babies come, and you just, even if you want to, you don't have enough time for them. So it can be traumatic.
I certainly see that with my own clients. When you have a baby at home and you're bottle feeding them, as gay fathers do,
we tried the other
you're
thing,
holding the baby. The baby's with you all the time, or they're in the crib, or at this point they're not even in a high chair. So the dogs come over and they investigate what's going on.
Right.
So they get. With our dogs, they come over, they sniff the baby. You're obviously not going to let them jump up. And so there's this gradual, I would say it's a very gradual introduction.
Right.
I don't think our dogs, I don't recall ever having any real animosity until they became toddlers. And then, I watched like a hawk. I still remember to this day, Tiffany is the dog's name, who passed away this year. She was the only dog who ever took a snarl or snap once, and that was when I think it must have been our oldest, Mira, who had gone up to her and probably pulled something, an ear or a tail or something. I knew what was going to happen. I never leave, and I always tell my clients, don't leave your kids alone with your dog ever, or your cat ever. It's just an accident waiting to happen, and we're all part of their social order, and there's a hierarchy that goes on, and you need to pay attention to it. It doesn't matter how nice your dog is or your cat is; it's unpredictable. So, I was there when it happened. It was somewhat it wasn't planned in the sense of what the dog did, but I was anticipating it could happen. So there was control of the situation. She did a little snarl and snap. She never did anything. It was like a warning, and I reprimanded her Tiffany verbally for doing it. It never ever happened again with either dog. Fortunately, I've had clients who've had to rehome pets that go through, and go right through the gambit, including seeing a veterinary dog psychologist, somebody who's board specialized in things, and they just can't get past the point. So
I think for us, we have a little Chihuahua.
We were extreme because we
did.
The hierarchy in our home is
did you say a Chihuahua?
Chihuahua Dachshund mix, and we brought our children were born in Oregon, and we arrived in LA when the children were 53 hours old. We brought the kids into their new room, their nursery. We put them together into a crib. They were going to be in one crib together for a while anyway. And our in-laws, our parents were there, and I picked up our little dog and just dumped him into the crib with the two kids at 53 hours old. And one of our sets of parents lost it. They were like, ah! But yeah, it was very important to us from the very get-go that, that both the dog kind of understand what these little animals are, and that the kids start to feel as comfortable as possible. Certainly we were going to watch, especially at the beginning. Yeah. It worked out pretty well. Although, a question for you. So, at what age, if at all, did your kids hit or kick one of your dogs? Did that ever happen? Because it's happened with us.
I don't recall the kids ever, in all honesty, any of my kids hitting or kicking, and I'm going back to my older daughters as well. I don't think I've ever had that issue happen. They certainly hit and kick each other, and that's an issue all the time. But the dogs with these guys, no. As the kids got older, they're with my ex-husband a lot, and the dogs were down there later. I was living in an apartment, and he had a large house, so the dog stayed with the yard when we split up. But I think kids have more respect in a general rule, and our dogs are bigger as well,
Right.
For pets than they do for their siblings.
Oh
Children,
yeah.
that is.
No doubt about that.
Yeah.
But and it was not, with our kids, it was more like, you're bothering me. You're in my way. I'm going to sort of smack you out of the way. And I will say that I think we had a somewhat unbalanced response to that, because it really comes down to, don't make us take sides between you and the dog, because we can't decide which one wins.
I do have a story, actually.
Please.
But she wasn't old enough at the time, so my second oldest daughter, Sarah, and I'll have to tell her about this so that she can listen in.
She can listen, yeah.
She decided to do some artwork with her scissors on we had 4 cats at the time, and I got a panicked call from my now ex-wife, and of course, if anyone's ever had a pet with an ear laceration just on the tip, they bleed like there's no tomorrow, right. And the pet shakes their head around, so it looks like far worse than it is. Right? It looks like a murder scene.
Yeah.
So that is the one story that I have. I mean, but kids do have a tendency to pull tails and ears and things like that.
Right.
Yeah.
What's the biggest myth you ever heard about dogs or cats?
Maybe the biggest current myth is that they're like wolves. This the current advertising techniques that a lot of the pet food companies have when they're trying to. You've probably seen the grain-free symbols.
Oh yeah.
Which is not nutritionally driven. It's not under AFCO, which is a government type of quasi-government organization that looks at nutritional requirements of pets.
Okay.
It started out as an advertising ploy by one company, and they put a grain-free logo on their bag, and it soon took off. And now the general population public believes that grain-free is something that has come from somewhere.
Is it because a dog is supposed to be a wolf and a wolf is supposed to eat meat?
But they're no more like wolves than we are like our predecessors 10,000 years ago.
Sure, but I mean that's the basis of the myth.
Dogs have gone through way more generations than we have of turnover. So the dog that we have today has been raised to kind of eat what people eat for 10,000 years or something like that. So genetically through selection, what our pets eat and what wolves eat are a little different. I mean, obviously the same in most respects physiologically, but they still require some carbs. They are not obligate carnivores like cats are. But there's this whole marketing ploy. I mean, the pet food industry is insane. What you feed your dogs is as controversial as what religion you are. If you ever want to get into a debate with somebody, to ask them what they feed their dog, and you will get an earful of what you should and shouldn't be doing. I mean, it's like a dog park conversation. You go in, and the clerk at the whatever corner pet store it is now will tell you why you shouldn't be feeding this or that. I mean, I try and avoid I would sooner talk politics with my clients here in West Hollywood than what diet they should be eating, because it can open up a can of worms.
Right. Well, it's important for us to know what Donald Trump and Melania feed their dog. Do they have a dog? I bet they don't have a dog.
They don't have a dog.
At least
I would say that some political person is their dog. But,
that's good. That's good. Anyway.
So you're not gonna recommend what to feed the dog? Do you think that?
Well, no, I will traverse carefully, and often I get people asking certain things. For parents with children, I do really steer them away from raw diets because of the risks to human health.
If the child gets that food in his mouth.
So the Centers for Disease Control on the human side, they have information on their website about feeding raw food diets to your pets because of the types of pathogens that are in the raw food. It's been proven conclusively the types of things that are in there. Salmonella would just be an example. It's not something pets really get. I mean, they could, but it's not really a problem with them. But We do know that they shed salmonella in their stools if they're eating a raw food diet, and all raw food diets at some point are contaminated pretty much with, it's because of how they're mixed together, will have salmonella in them. It's been studied well, and there's been many papers that have come out over probably the last 10 years. So your dog can end up being a source. Everybody washes their fruit and vegetables, hopefully, before they give them to the kids, but they're not worried about the child going over and petting the dog. So if they have salmonella in the stool and they're going in the backyard and in the grass and contaminating the environment, that salmonella organism will be there. It's just an example of one thing. There's also other types of parasites that dogs routinely get, cats as well, that children can get. So those would be subjects that, if I'm talking about things with people with children, I try to address routine intestinal parasite control, flea control, proper flea control, things like that, because things like Yersinia pestis, which is the plague, still exists.
Let's not get the plague.
There are things within like Orange County and LA County where they warn about how many cases a year are still contracted by people. So our pets are our biggest source, not rats these days because they're not in our homes, like with the Black Plague. But these organisms haven't gone away. So, but our kids are more susceptible to many things, including children can't, and we can't per se get roundworms from our dogs, which is a really common puppy and kitten thing. But they can get inappropriate infections, where if they get I think it's still the most common cause of blindness in human children is, and it's not very common in California because it's dry, but where it's humid and wet and warm, if they get feces from a pet who has roundworms in a cut in their eye or they eat it, these eggs that are in the stool can they will grow inappropriately, and they can, if it's in the eye, they can cause blindness. If it's in the skin, there's certain diseases, and certainly in the intestines, they can become established not as worms, but as an aberrant sort of disease. So
this is an argument for making sure that the dog is also kept healthy.
Correct. It's like protecting your kids by, doing something you should really be doing to help your pet as well. We live in a world where people don't want to use chemicals to prevent diseases or give vaccines to prevent diseases because they haven't seen problems with those diseases because we've been well protected for years. But it's like with, I'm sure we all heard, we may have heard or not heard all the controversy over vaccines causing autism and things like that. There was a faked report in the United Kingdom, but people stopped giving vaccines for whooping cough. There were kids in California that were dying of whooping cough, for example, and people just hadn't seen it before. I think not polio. Maybe it was polio. There was something. Measles. Measles outbreak here a few years ago. I heard on the radio as well, because people stop and they think the diseases have gone away because they haven't seen it.
I've been a little bit concerned, as I expressed to you before we started, that this podcast might not be controversial enough. So I just want to say that people who are not inoculating their children are crazy.
I want to actually ask, but the other way around, like food that kids eat that can endanger the pet. Because when I give my kid chocolate, I'm all stressed out that something dropped. Like I watch around the table if something drops on the floor. I
actually love this subject.
Okay, good.
Because there's so many. There's a really good myth actually, is chocolate.
Oh, seriously?
So let's talk about chocolate for a minute. So chocolate I don't worry about in my home with my pets from this perspective. Chocolate is not toxic unto itself, probably any more so for you than for your pet. The problem is, we'll pick, and the type of chocolate's important as well. So let's pick milk chocolate, solid milk chocolate. The toxic dose is about 1 ounce per pound. And by toxic, that means you have to eat a certain amount before it adversely affects you. One of the most toxic substances in your home is salt. You don't think of it as being toxic because most of the time you're not going to eat that much. But per gram, it's like one of the worst things. If you eat too much, it can cause seizures and all kinds of things. So chocolate, if you ate, the toxic dose is 1 ounce per pound. If I ate 160, I think I was 164 the last time I weighed. If I ate 164 ounces of milk chocolate, I would be really ill.
I don't think you'd get. I
So
think you'd be really ill.
Your Chihuahua, how much does your Chihuahua weigh?
16
like 5
pounds?
pounds or something
Oh,
like
no,
that?
he's bigger than that.
60.
16.
Oh,
He's a
you-
mix.
Diet time.
How rude! He's big boned. No, he definitely.
So your 16-pound Chihuahua will eat 16 ounces of chocolate without hesitation. They have huge stomach capacity, and they will eat that amount. So
If they
you
have
do
the
have to be
opportunity.
careful, because if they have the opportunity, they will consume a large amount. And that's why their cats won't eat it. Cats are smarter than that.
Right.
But a dog will just eat before even thinking, or many will. And chocolate's sweet, they love it.
So you're saying? So let me just make sure I have this clear.
So if you drop a chocolate chip, don't panic.
right,
This is what
Because
I'm
it's
saying.
Only if you're giving the dog the opportunity to gluttonize themselves.
Don't wrap your solid dark chocolate huge Trader Joe. What can I say? Trader Joe's on your podcast.
Yes, you can.
They have those huge bars the kids like look at and salivate.
Right.
Don't wrap it up and put it under your tree,
Got it.
because the dog will smell it. They don't care if it's wrapped. They'll eat the wrapper and the chocolate, and they will need to come see me at the ER.
And so if they eat a small amount of it, is there a period of time before it's out of their system and you don't have to worry about, meaning, does it build up over the course of weeks?
So I
or is
wouldn't
this
recommend
instant?
waiting to see symptoms.
Right.
If you find that your dog's eating chocolate, there are some, I mean, you can call the ASPCA Animal Poison Control is the place we typically recommend to see if it's something, if they've eaten enough that they're going to be symptomatic, and they will tell you whether or not you should go in and see your vet.
Okay.
To get on to back to some really toxic things, raisins and grapes were banned from my house when we had dogs, because they're not we don't know what causes them. It's but they can potentially be fatal, even if like a little box of little tiny boxes of raisins for like a retriever, a medium to large size dog, that can be potentially can cause kidney failure.
Wow.
So, and same with grapes. I asked Poison Control about wine, and they said no, wine's not an issue. Because how many of us have our glass of red wine and the dog comes over to investigate? I mean, my
like to
youngest
booze up our
son
dog.
was terrible about going around and trying whatever was in that glass, but wine's fine.
Right. Wow.
The other thing that a lot of people don't know about is the sweetener xylitol. So xylitol is in many sugarless gums. It's in a lot of sugar-free gummy bear type things. It's very safe for people and diabetics, so it's a common sweetener. It is very little is potentially, again, can cause liver failure, severe hypoglycemia, low blood sugar, and so forth in dogs.
What's the packet brand? Is there a packet brand of the xylitol?
It's not brand specific. For example, some sugar-free gums within the same brand are sweetened with xylitol, and some are not.
Okay.
I happened to be at Starbucks, and the Starbucks gum that I looked at, the packet had xylitol in it. Some Trident I found online had xylitol in it, and some did not. So it's variable.
This is a good one. This is a good one. Yeah.
We actually see this a fair amount, where someone will say their dog ate trail mix or something, and there was chocolate. They'll call because there was
raisins.
chocolate in it. The chocolate is not the problem. It'll be the raisins that's the problem, that we end up hospitalizing those pets.
Wow.
I had somebody who this is just a couple of weeks ago, the dog got into a laundry list of her meds and everything like that. The only thing we were concerned about was the vitamin D gummies.
Okay.
And some are sweetened with xylitol, some are not. Vitamin D can be potentially toxic, but the Poison Control said there weren't enough in there to do that. But the big concern, again, was xylitol.
Wow.
Yeah.
By the way,
That's a good list.
At TLC, do you have mostly dogs and cats, or any other?
We only look after dogs and cats here. I mean, if people, bring in an injured bird that needs to be put to sleep, we are allowed to do that. We can't treat wildlife unless it's something like that. We don't look after birds or pocket pets here. There
Did you
are
ever get a pig?
few.
Did you ever get a pig?
Not here.
No pigs?
I mean, I come from northern British Columbia, so I've even done surgery on a bear cub that a conservation officer inadvertently shot through the abdomen trying to dart it. but not in West Hollywood. No, dogs and cats are enough for us.
I'm shocked. I'm really shocked that there are no pigs here.
I've seen them.
Oh, okay.
There used to be. I've seen somebody walking their pig up actually on in Hancock Park.
Right.
He walks his pig.
Of course.
Yeah.
That seems reasonable.
We talked a lot about dogs, but I want to also to talk about cats, even though Alex and I don't.
They
have
kind
a
of
cat.
get ignored sometimes. Poor kitty cats.
Because they ignore us. I'm sorry. I think that the feeling is mutual, but all right, whatever.
Cats are very different. Dogs
Yeah.
are pack animals or social animals.
Right.
Yeah.
Cats are very territorial, just like they are in the wild, and they tolerate us. You know, I was listening to something really interesting on NPR radio, and they're talking about. And since we're talking about children, how you can, and this is memory, how you store things in your mind and categorize them. So we tend to categorize family in one area of our brain and things like names, according to this NPR segment I listened to about a year ago. And people will confuse their children's names, and you go as a parent, you're going to yell at one person or one of your children and you call them another name. My ex-wife used to do it, and I thought, how would you do that? And then I do it all the time. People include dogs with that.
Oh, yeah.
Where they will go to yell at their dog and call, or their child and call the dog's name or something like that. They don't do it with cats.
Oh.
It was really interesting. It was talking about the difference between cats and dogs.
Oh, I'm going to tell
But-
my friend Karen about this. She's going to be pissed off. Excellent.
But cats are so much easier as far as training and things like that. I mean, they're almost self-trained,
Right.
for the most part.
But with babies, did you heard of any strange stories about cats?
I've had fewer issues with people with cats. I can't think of one that comes to mind. I've been doing this for 28 years, so I'm
Right.
sure there's been something. With my own 4 cats and having 2 babies with them, the cats sort of check the child out, and it's like, okay, fine.
Right.
And away they went, and that was kind of the end of the story.
Yeah.
My children, my 2 older daughters, who are now in their mid and late 20s, used to chase the cats around. The cats would just like find a safe place. They tend to be fairly clever at evading. It's more like an evasion technique the cats seem to develop.
Right.
There are certainly cats that I have that can get aggressive with owners, and those would be particular cats. They're not that common, but that I would be a little cautious of having around a child. But
I have to believe that you've had to deal with very severely injured dogs or cats where the kid's around. The kid whose dog it is comes to the vet's office with the parent. I don't know. Maybe it.
you're
hasn't
going to make me
happened.
cry now, right?
I am. This is part of the Barbara Walters portion of our. But seriously,
it's happened this week with a very special cat.
yeah.
And a special client with a daughter who was here with a cat who was hit by a car.
Yeah.
And it didn't end well.
Yeah. So I guess my question for you is, there are obviously different parents have different approaches at different ages to the way they deal with this. If it were you at the different ages of your kids, God forbid, how would you approach the very physical aspect of being there and what you say to them?
Sure.
I'd love to hear some of that from a person who's obviously had experience on both sides of it.
Well, I generally will let parents... not generally. I let parents address or include their children as they feel that is appropriate. I don't always agree necessarily with how it happens. Having come out at a later age, I don't believe in keeping secrets. With my own children, I mean, children tend to be far more accepting and knowing of things than their parents are maybe ready to understand that they are.
Right.
I think trying to this is my own opinion, obviously, having kids, nothing to do from the veterinarian, but when I see someone making up stories to make the child feel better, that is not how I parent. I try and put it in terms that I'm not a religious person, so I try and put it in terms of, when our dogs died. Have you ever seen the movie Where the Red Fern Grows?
No.
So it's an older movie. All my kids have seen it. It's of a vintage of Old Yeller. And so our 2 dogs, my ex-husband has some of their ashes. We had them cremated, and I have half. They are planted in a pot with ferns.
Oh, I see.
And that's where they are. It's part of it, and everybody has to do things with their own belief system, obviously, with how you teach your children, whatever that may be. But kids can typically handle things fairly well.
Right.
So I don't think that you need to hide things from them, maybe would be the better way of putting it, in my opinion. So,
I must have been, we had a lot of dogs when I was growing up, always the big mutts types. And I remember I must have been 9 years old when one of my dogs got hit by a car, and we rushed him to the vet at night, and it wasn't going to be good. And my father, I think against my mother's wishes, I can't really remember, insisted on taking me into the room where he was lying to say goodbye to him. And no, it is a memory that I will never lose. No. I don't think it was a bad thing. I just think it was it's an extremely powerful memory, and I think that, I guess, at least in retrospect, I'm happy that I had.
Yeah. With my own children, Tiffany, who died last January, she was in the hospital for a week. She was in kidney failure. Came on suddenly. Like I said, she was 16, almost 16 shy of a month, and I had taken her home with me for the weekend. The kids knew she was sick, and I gave them about a week sort of lead time. And then I had her at home. My ex-husband's fiance came up. My ex-husband was out of town. And so the whole family mostly was in my house. And the kids all decided what they wanted to do. One of my 3 children, who probably most people would think would be the I'll use the word strongest, but that's not what I mean.
Yeah.
Maybe the
toughest.
Yeah. That's a good word for it. Did not want to stay and went to his room. And my older daughter and they fight all the time. He was crying. My youngest son stayed and probably, if you wanted to say handled the best, appeared to handle it the best.
Right.
But my older daughter went and comforted my oldest son and stayed with him and helped him out. So it was like this family thing, and the kids handled it very, very well. I think, with euthanasia, often the thing that gets people the most is just how quick it is. And it's like the light switch, and that's still the hardest thing for me to this day, is just how quick that is. Yeah. And I think and I've been in the room with the parents and the kids far more. It's the thing that affects me the most, and the thing I like to do the least, but I know is probably one of the kindest things that I could do for that family after being with them all those years. Right. But every child handles it differently. I think the child needs to make that decision. If they're too young to make the decision, I don't know that they need to be there, because that's a big thing. You can remember it to the day. So
By the way, do your kids want to become veterinarians?
Oh, that's a good question.
I think many of them have all wanted to be, or said they've wanted to be at one point in time. I don't know if it's because they actually did, or because you want to say that you want to be like your parent.
Yeah, most kids want to be.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
well, is there a chance for any of them? What do you think?
Well, I still have 3 that are in. My oldest of my second brood, it just went into high school this year. She's in 9th grade. I have a habit of saying grade 9, which is a Canadian way of pronouncing that grade. And my youngest is just in 5th.
Oh, well, it can still happen. That's
yes.
Good. That's great. I want to say that I've lived here in this neighborhood for 18 years and have brought 2 dogs to VCA, your hospital, and I've also brought myself and loved ones to the Person Hospital a few blocks away. You guys are better, certainly in terms of caring and treatment, and it really has been a very special experience for us over these years.
We try. Most people get in this industry. They don't get into it for the paycheck, although I'm sure it can feel that way if you're writing the check on the other side of the table. it's like private care, right? So, but the people that get into it typically want to do what they're doing and get into it because of their hearts, usually, not necessarily because of their heads.
So we almost coming towards the end of the interview, but I wanted to talk to you about your coming out, because you came out to the you mentioned it.
Yes.
You came out at a later
I did.
age.
It's a whole different world these days. I was 32. I was married. I had kids. I had sort of I always had goals as a child. I always was attracted to guys. My parents were very liberal, and they had these books at the time called the Life Cycle series, and it explained why I had those feelings. I wanted to emulate those guys and so forth. So I had excuses. What got rid of my excuses was I had stereotypes like everybody else, and I didn't relate to the stereotype that I had in my head. And I ended up at some point computerizing my practice up in northern Canada, and I would be there at night running lab work. I didn't have techs, so I did everything in the middle of the night myself. I was on call, and I got on. I eventually ended up getting online, and my stereotype bubble got burst eventually, just from, we'll call it online research, which were just photos back in the days. And I ended up I was on a board in southern British Columbia. I ended up going into the Gay and Lesbian Center. I called first and ended up going down and speaking with a counselor. And I had no excuses anymore, and that was when I was 32. My wife and I had been going through some stuff anyway, and it was just sort of the end of that chapter, shall we say. And we get along well, so we parented well afterwards together.
Columbia?
She's in British Columbia. She's retired now, and we have children and grandchildren together, and it's a forever relationship regardless.
Right.
So yeah.
Well, that's amazing.
And then you got married and had more kids.
I got remarried down here. We actually we were married in Canada, and the whole Prop 8, old Prop 8 thing happened. We got remarried here just in case. Apparently our marriage in Canada still counted under what the rule was in California at that time.
Right, that's right.
I actually got my green card prior to it being available through marriage and then my citizenship. So I got mine the old-fashioned hard way, and then we ended up getting legitimately divorced. So,
legitimately.
And, so the kids stay mostly with you or with your?
So my ex-husband and I mean, he still works largely in West Hollywood, but when I met him, he was in Orange County. He always wanted to go back to Orange County. We lived about 4 blocks apart, and we co-parented 1 week on, 1 week off with the kids. And he wanted to move south. And it had to be a joint decision under our divorce. And the schools were our biggest concern. The type of education they were getting. The schools that were available where he moved to were far better than where we lived in LA, and we couldn't afford private school for 3 kids, in all honesty. And I wanted them to be able to go to public school, coming from my own background. So we made the choice that they would spend the school weeks with him, and they would spend the weekends with me. So they're with me Friday through Sunday, and they're with him Sunday through Friday.
So they basically have the reverse Disney shuttle, meaning rather than going down to Orange County over the weekend for Disney, they get away from that.
Yeah.
Oh, they're so lucky.
What's it like to co-parent with an ex-husband?
My ex-wife was easier. They're just different people. I am kind of joking. I've always said that I found very little difference between, you're married to a person, right?
Yes.
So I find, for me personally and socially, it's not been a different experience either way.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark. Whoa.
As he falls off the chair. Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mark. This was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alex.
Yes.
Hi.
Hi. We're back.
So the chocolate chips on the floor are fine. for the dog.
Yeah, and yet you're still terrified of it.
Yeah, I don't know. So that's the funny thing. I mean, we came back like all excited about this news about the chocolate, but still, from out of habit, I'm still freaking out. It will take some time for it to kind of sink in, but definitely raisins are not going to be seen in our house anymore.
Yeah, that was quite a revelation, I gotta say.
Yeah.
I was very surprised at what happened when I was talking about my experience seeing my dog Zephyr before he went.
Oh.
I didn't expect to have that kind of reaction, but just talking about it was very powerful for me, and was my first experience with death. You know, and as
often kids, this is their first experience.
And I'll tell you what, as sad and horrible as it was, I think it's actually really healthy. It's really valuable that you can have that experience with someone that you love when you're young, and it helps, I guess, somewhat prepare you for what's to come later in your life, hopefully later in your life.
Yeah. Well, I grew up without a dog. I grew up dogless. So I really discovered the joy of having a pet only when I met Alex and he was with a dog. But I have two things that I kind of learned, I think, from Dreyfus. Rest in peace. First of all, he died before our kids were born, and we have a poster of him in our office, and we're still mentioning him to our kids and tell them stories about him. But one of the things that I learned from Dreyfus' death is that we must cremate. How do you say it?
Yeah, cremate.
Cremate dogs.
What?
Because they just took him. We didn't ask for anything. We don't have anywhere to go. And I think for kids, it's very hard to understand. So for example, when Mark said that his dogs are like in plants or something like that, I think it's easier for the kids and for you. I mean, you know.
But I'm just going to say, at least for me,
our kids they don't know what life is like without Kube now.
Sure.
So
I'm just going to say I'm fine with the cremation. I'm fine with the plants. I'm not fine with an urn in the house. I just can't. I can't say, there's Fluffy next to the salt shaker. I just can't. I'm concerned that there will be an accident and then you'll eat the Fluffy cat, and then I don't know. It's just too many things can go wrong. But in the plant, I'm good with being in the plant.
Pretty much that's it this week. All of our the biggest revelations and the rest of the stuff, if you want to come back to it, it's going to be on the Gaze with Kids website, and you can also check everything out on daddysqr.com. You can write to us at hello@daddysqr.com, and
you can answer this question: should you get a dog or a cat? Probably a dog, but okay. Should you get a dog or a cat before you have children as a form of preparation? I would like to know. I would like to know whether people think that having a dog or a cat gives you a kind of runway of experience for what it will be like to have children.
And we're talking to the dads, not to the prospective dads.
But nor are we talking to the dogs.
Alex, I wish you a great week this week.
And I wish you a great week as well, Jan.
And I hope it will be with less criticism.
Well, I'm spending it with you, so there will certainly
only
be plenty.
I am allowed to criticize you. I don't let anybody else.
Fair enough.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.